Most people misunderstand why avoidant attachment types fear love so intensely. They think it's about pride, ego, or even just a lack of interest. It's not. It's fear. Deep, cellular fear. The kind that gets wired in early when love meant exposure, and exposure meant pain. To an avoidant, love is not a warm place to rest. It's a battlefield. It's the moment the armor comes off, and they're certain that the moment they let someone see them, they'll be left bleeding. That's why you can't approach them the way you would approach someone secure. When you try to comfort their fear, you accidentally feed it. You prove to their mind that love is something fragile, something they must be protected from. And when people feel they need protection from you, they run. What no one tells you is this: you cannot make an avoidant feel safe by trying to make them feel safe. Because safety that has to be proven is not safety. It's performance. Their nervous system is hypersensitive to pressure. Every reassuring word, every long explanation, every attempt to prove your loyalty only registers as one thing to them: need. And need is dangerous. Their subconscious starts to whisper, if I let this person close, they'll expect something from me. They'll take something from me. I'll lose myself again. So they retreat, not because you've done anything wrong, but because their brain believes closeness equals annihilation. So what do? You stop comforting their fear, and you start confronting it. Not with aggression, with composure, with stillness. When you stop scrambling to soothe their panic, you become the first person in their life who doesn't dance around their fear like it's sacred. You show them it's just noise, like standing in front of a barking dog, not yelling at it, not running from it, just calmly existing until the barking loses its power. When you hold that space, you are no longer participating in their internal war. You become the observer of it. And here's the paradox: the moment they see you are not trying to control their fear or erase it, the fear starts to shrink on its own. Understand this: avoidants are not allergic to love. They are allergic to feeling trapped. Their fear is not of you, it's of losing themselves. That's why your emotional stillness is the most disarming force you can offer. When they push away and you don't chase, when they pull close and you don't suffocate, you become a mystery to their nervous system. It doesn't know how to label you, and that confusion is powerful, because confusion interrupts fear. It creates space for curiosity, and curiosity is the beginning of trust. Most people either chase avoidance or cut them off. Both strategies feed the same fear. Chasing confirms love will overwhelm you. Cutting them off confirms love will abandon you. But holding your ground does something different. It proves love will not destroy you. You stand there calm, rooted, present. No performance, no panic, just presence. And that presence becomes the first crack of light under their door. Psychologically, what you are doing is shifting their association. Right now, their brain links intimacy with danger, what classical conditioning would call a conditioned fear response. You are teaching their nervous system something revolutionary: that connection can exist without control, that they can be seen and still remain whole. This doesn't happen with words. It happens with energy. It happens when they test you by pulling away, and instead of collapsing, you keep living. Instead of arguing, you keep glowing. Instead of chasing, you simply are. They will fight this at first. Expect it. They will try to provoke chaos to confirm their worldview. Stay still. They will try to make you feel invisible to confirm their power. Stay visible, because eventually they will run out of reasons to fear you. They will see that their terror of being seen was only ever a shadow, and you were never here to hurt them. That realization cracks something ancient open in them. And for the first time, the possibility of love no longer feels like the threat of death. This is the key that begins it all. Don't rescue their fear, reveal its illusion. Because when love stops trying to prove it's safe, it finally becomes undeniable. If you want someone with avoidant attachment to ever feel safe in love, you have to understand something most people never even consider. Safety to them isn't about what you say, it's about what you consistently are. And this is where almost everyone fails. They try to convince the avoidant with words, promises, and reassurances. They think if they just explain how much they care, how much they're willing to be patient, the avoidant will finally relax and open up. But what they don't realize is that to an avoidant's nervous system, words mean nothing if the emotional climate keeps changing, because their deepest fear is that love will start out as safety and end as chaos. And if they even sense chaos might come, they will preemptively retreat to protect themselves from it. This is why emotional safety has to become non-negotiable. Not something you perform, not something you negotiate every time there's tension, but something you embody like gravity. Something that doesn't disappear when they withdraw or get cold or distant. When they sense you'll keep showing up as the same person even when they pull away. Their brain begins to doubt its own fear narrative. They start to think, wait, maybe closeness isn't danger. Maybe this isn't going to explode. That shift doesn't come from intensity. It comes from steadiness. And steadiness is the very thing avoidants have rarely experienced in love. Most people confuse emotional safety with emotional softness. They think being safe means being endlessly reassuring, endlessly accommodating. But that's not safety. That's instability dressed as kindness. True safety is consistency without condition. It means you don't raise the emotional temperature to match their coldness, and you don't lower your own boundaries to earn their warmth. You stop trying to manage their responses, and you start mastering your own. That's what creates the psychological container they've never known, love that doesn't shift shape to get a reaction. And here's the part that will challenge everything you've been taught about relationships. Safety isn't about closeness. It's about predictability. To an avoidant, closeness without predictability feels like being lured into a trap, but distance with predictability, that feels strangely safe. That's why they can crave someone from afar, but panic up close. So the way you rewire this is simple but not easy. You keep your presence predictable, even when your proximity changes. If they disappear for days, you don't chase, but you don't crumble either. If they reappear, you don't flood them with emotion, but you don't freeze them out. You just stay steady. And this confuses the part of their brain that equates love with volatility. You are training their nervous system to stop seeing connection as a threat. Think about it from a philosophical lens. Every avoidant is trying to outrun what they believe is inevitable, being consumed by love or destroyed by its loss. Their solution has been control. Control of closeness, control of emotion, control of their own needs. But what dissolves control is not confrontation, it's stability. When they see that your emotional presence doesn't waver, their control mechanisms lose their purpose. They no longer need to manage distance to feel safe, because safety is already present. And that's the moment they start questioning everything they believed about intimacy. It's also the moment they start watching you more closely. Not your words, your patterns. They want to see if you're real, if the stability is genuine or just a tactic. This is where most people fail because they get impatient. They want the breakthrough now. They want the walls down immediately. But if you rush the process, you snap the trust in half. The avoidant has to see that your consistency isn't a strategy to win them. It's who you are, with or without their approval. Only then do they lower their guard, not as a gesture of trust, but because they finally don't feel the need to guard themselves at all. And when that moment happens, something remarkable occurs. The same nervous system that once treated love as a threat begins to associate your presence with calm. Not excitement, not euphoria. Calm. And that calm becomes addictive to them because they've never had it. You are not just giving them safety, you are redefining what safety even means to their body. You are showing them that love doesn't have to be earned, performed, or survived. It can simply be. That is the turning point. That is when their fear stops running the relationship. and their desire finally gets a chance to speak. Because when safety becomes the atmosphere, instead of the negotiation, love finally becomes possible. Here's what most people never realize about someone with avoidant attachment: their entire emotional strategy depends on distance. But that strategy only works if you keep feeding it. They survive on a delicate loop. They withdraw, you pursue, and the pursuit reassures them that they're still desired while letting them avoid the vulnerability of coming close. It's a game of control, not love. They get the reward of knowing they're wanted without the risk of actually being known. That's why the most powerful thing you can do is break that loop entirely. Stop giving them the very validation that fuels their escape. When you go emotionally quiet, not cold, not hostile, just still, you pull the rug out from under their defense system. Suddenly, the distance they used to feel safe becomes a prison they built for themselves. This is the paradox nobody talks about. Pulling back from an avoidant is not about punishment. It's about creating friction between their craving and their fear. Right now, their fear always wins because their craving never has to fight for oxygen. You keep supplying it. Every time you check in, every time you reassure them, every time you make space for them to return on their terms, you make it easy for their fear to stay in control. But when you stop feeding their sense of being constantly pursued, their fear loses its backup. Their craving for connection has to rise to the surface because it no longer has your energy to hide behind. And this is where it gets psychologically fascinating. For someone with avoidant wiring, love has always been an external event. Something happening to them, something trying to invade their inner world. But when you stop chasing, love stops being something they can resist from the outside. It becomes something they have to generate from within. That's when their carefully managed emotional distance starts to collapse. Not because you push them closer, but because they realize they're the only one keeping the distance alive. That realization is deeply uncomfortable for them. And that's exactly the point. Think about it. Avoidants have spent their entire lives mastering emotional control as a way to protect themselves. They shut down their needs so they never have to feel the pain of not having them met. But when you remove the external validation they quietly depend on, they're forced to feel those needs again. And when those needs wake up, so does their fear, but also so does their desire. It's like shaking a dormant system back to life. They start questioning their own strategy. If I don't actually want closeness, why do I feel this loss so intensely now that it's gone? That question is the seed of transformation, because the moment they notice their craving, they're no longer fully controlled by their fear. But here's the crucial part. You have to be absolutely anchored while doing this. Going quiet can't come from resentment, manipulation, or trying to make them miss you. If it does, they will smell it instantly and their defenses will spike. This has to come from power, from a place where your self-worth is not on the table, where your energy is no longer invested in managing their fear and is fully invested in protecting your own peace. That's what makes the silence magnetic instead of hostile. It's not absence. They feel it as presence without pressure. And presence without pressure is what their nervous system has never experienced before. From a philosophical perspective, this is the moment you reverse the power dynamic. Up until now, they've held all the emotional leverage. They could disappear at will, knowing you would emotionally wait on the doorstep for them to return. But when you withdraw your validation, you reclaim that leverage, not to dominate them, but to equalize the field. Love can't exist in captivity. It can only exist where both people are free to leave and both choose to stay. Your silence makes that choice real again. It gives them the space to confront their fear and decide, without your emotional scaffolding propping them up, if they are willing to risk closeness. And most avoidants, when faced with that silence, will experience something they've avoided their entire lives, the realization that distance doesn't protect them from pain. It causes it. And that's when the real shift begins. They start moving toward you, not because you pulled them, but because the silence woke up something deeper than fear. It woke up their hunger for love. So understand this, you don't break an avoidance fear by arguing with it. You break it by withdrawing the oxygen that keeps it alive. Because when you stop feeding their fear, their need for love finally has room to breathe. One of the most powerful shifts you can create with someone who has avoidant attachment is showing them that love does not have to cost them their autonomy. This is where so many people fail without even realizing it. They think the path to winning an avoidance heart is through proving devotion, proving loyalty, proving that they'll never leave. But that only tightens the avoidance fear because it sends a hidden message. If you let me in, you'll lose yourself. They've spent their whole life guarding against exactly that. So when you come at them with your whole identity wrapped around them, their survival instinct doesn't see it as love, it sees it as invasion. What dismantles that fear isn't reassurance, it's independence. When an avoidant watches you live with fullness, with purpose, with emotional depth that isn't dependent on them, it disorients them in the best way possible. Because their nervous system has been conditioned to expect that love equals enmeshment, that closeness erases individuality. And here you are embodying the opposite. You care, but you're not consumed. You love, but you're not waiting. You show them that being close to someone doesn't mean disappearing inside them. And that's when something strange happens inside their mind. The threat system that once saw love as a trap begins to see it as a choice. Understand, the deepest fear of an avoidant is not actually being unloved. It's being absorbed. They don't want to be pulled into a tidal wave of someone else's needs and emotions until they no longer recognize themselves. That's why they've built their entire emotional architecture around control and distance. But when they see you holding your identity firmly, when they see that you could walk away and still remain whole, you disrupt that architecture. You show them that love doesn't require self-erasure. It actually thrives when both people remain fully themselves. And that realization doesn't just intrigue them, it awakens desire. Because suddenly, you're not a risk to their independence. You're a mirror of it. Philosophically, this taps into something profound. Most people chase love as if it's something to acquire, but real love is something that amplifies who you already are. Avoidants have never seen that. They've only known relationships where individuality was traded for security. So they've chosen individuality at the cost of intimacy. When you embody both, autonomy and connection, you shatter their false dichotomy. They begin to see that closeness doesn't have to suffocate them. It can actually give them more room to breathe. And when their nervous system makes that association, their fear begins to dissolve, not through pressure, but through inspiration. You don't pull them in, you pull them up. But this only works if it's real. You can't fake independence as a strategy to get their attention, because they will feel the performance and their defenses will double. This has to be authentic. It means you build a life so meaningful and vibrant that you don't need them to complete it. You enjoy them, but you don't orbit around them. You are emotionally available, but not emotionally dependent. That's the paradox that makes your presence magnetic. Because most people who get close to an avoidant either smother them with need or mirror their distance. When you do neither, when you stand in the center of your own life while still being open to them, you become something they don't know how to categorize. And the human mind is drawn to what it can't categorize. Here's what happens when this clicks for them. They stop seeing you as a potential cage and start seeing you as a doorway into a kind of love they've never experienced. One that doesn't threaten their identity, but strengthens it. They begin to realize that being with you doesn't mean losing their freedom. It means expanding it. And that realization is the first time they want to move closer without fear trying to drag them backward. Because for the first time, Love doesn't feel like surrender. It feels like sovereignty. And that's the entire point. You don't dismantle an avoidance fear by convincing them you won't hurt them. You dismantle it by proving they won't lose themselves if they choose you. Because when love stops threatening their freedom, they finally start reaching for it. What breaks through to someone with avoidant attachment in a way nothing else can is emotional transparency without emotional weight. This is the paradox that confuses most people. They either hide their feelings completely, thinking it will make the avoidant feel safer, or they pour their emotions out in intense, urgent waves, hoping vulnerability will unlock connection. Both extremes backfire. Emotional hiding convinces the avoidant that closeness is dangerous because it makes people vanish. Emotional flooding convinces them that closeness is dangerous because it makes people unstable, what their nervous system has never seen. And what will rewrite their entire internal script is seeing someone express authentic feeling while remaining completely grounded. Not desperate, not demanding, just real. When you do this, you shatter their oldest belief that emotions are inherently chaotic. Avoidants were often shaped in environments where vulnerability led to shame, rejection, or unpredictability. Their minds were wired to treat feelings as something explosive that must be contained or avoided. So when you speak your truth calmly, when you say what you feel without asking them to fix it, carry it, or even respond to it, you bypass their fear entirely. They don't experience your vulnerability as a threat. They experience it as data. And for the first time, emotion becomes information instead of danger. That single shift disarms their entire defense system. But here's the key: your emotional honesty can't be performance. It can't come from trying to get them to open up. If you're being vulnerable just to provoke vulnerability, they will feel the hook and retreat. This has to be clean. It has to come from self-possession. You say what you feel because it's who you are, not because you're trying to control how they respond. That distinction is everything. Because what they fear most isn't your feelings. It's the hidden obligation that usually comes attached to feelings. They've been conditioned to believe that if they let someone close, they'll be buried under the weight of someone else's emotional world. When you show them feelings can exist without pressure, you dismantle that fear piece by piece. Think about what this does psychologically. It rewires their emotional associations. Their brain has been running a loop for years: vulnerability to loss of control type danger. You're interrupting that loop by showing them a new equation: vulnerability to clarity safety. You're proving that emotional honesty can actually make things calmer, not messier. That's a revelation for them, because they've never seen it. They've only known people who either hid what they felt or exploded with what they felt. You become something entirely new, a person who can feel deeply and stay steady, and that steadiness becomes the bridge their fear can walk across. From a philosophical perspective, this is also where love stops being about strategy and starts being about truth. Avoidants are masters of strategy. Every move they make is calculated to preserve distance. But truth disarms strategy. Truth cuts through manipulation, fear, and control. When you stand in your truth without flinching, you become immovable. And paradoxically, that stillness makes them feel safe enough to move closer, because they realize your emotions won't drown them and your boundaries won't disappear just because you care. You become the first person who proves that love doesn't have to cost them control or cost you your center. And here's the irony that makes this so powerful. The very thing they fear most, emotional closeness, is the very thing they start to crave once it stops trying to control them. When they see you can be emotionally exposed without trying to pull them in, they begin to move toward you on their own. Not because they're being pushed, but because for the first time, their nervous system feels curious instead of cornered. That curiosity is the seed of intimacy. And once it's planted, it grows quietly beneath their defenses until they realize the fear they've been obeying all their lives is no longer running the show. So understand this. You don't make an avoidant feel safe by hiding your heart or throwing it at their feet. You make them feel safe by holding it openly, calmly, and without apology. Because when love speaks the truth without demanding to be answered, even the most guarded hearts start to listen. When you reach the point where you can sit in silence with an avoidant and not demand anything from them, not attention, not affirmation, not emotional fireworks, you are stepping into the single most transformative dynamic that exists for them. Because what terrifies an avoidant isn't love itself. It's the cost they believe love will demand from them. In their mind, love equals surrender, and surrender equals annihilation of the self. For most of their lives, they've lived like lone wolves, self-reliant, self-contained, untouched. The moment someone gets close, their subconscious warns them, if I let this in, I will lose myself. So they push away. They create distance, not because they feel nothing, but because they fear feeling everything and having no control over it. But when you stand in front of them, and you do not chase, you do not plead, you do not pressure, you disrupt the script that has ruled their nervous system since childhood. This is where something powerful begins to happen. They're expecting the same old pattern. They distance, you pursue, they panic, you explode. But instead, they find you still, grounded, not needing them. And this shocks their nervous system. Because what they've never truly experienced is being wanted without being owned. Here's the paradox. Avoidants are starving for closeness, but they're allergic to control. They crave intimacy, yet they equate intimacy with entrapment. So the only way their brain will ever feel safe enough to trust love is if love comes without the chains. This is where you come in. You become the living embodiment of choice. You make them feel that staying is optional, not expected, that they can walk away, and you'll still be whole. And in that moment, something radical happens. Their fear of love begins to collapse, not because you convinced them, but because you gave them space to choose you. Choice is oxygen to the avoidant. And when you stop clinging, when you stop trying to extract love from them like it's a resource you're entitled to, they finally start to relax. Their walls don't come down because you broke them. Their walls come down because they realize they don't need them around you. They realize they are safe from the one thing they always feared, losing themselves. Because you've shown them that being loved by you doesn't mean disappearing into you. And this is where their entire relationship to love starts to rewire. Instead of seeing love as something that consumes their freedom, they start seeing love as something that coexists with it. They begin to feel like they can be fully themselves and still be fully connected, that they don't have to sacrifice their solitude to have intimacy, that they don't have to trade selfhood for closeness. And for an avoidant, that realization is nothing short of revolutionary. The truth is, you cannot make an avoidant love you. You can only make it safe for them to love. And safety for them doesn't look like endless reassurance, or constant validation, or chasing their withdrawal. Safety for them looks like your calm detachment. It looks like your ability to hold space without grabbing it. It looks like your emotional independence. That's what teaches their nervous system. I can be close to this person without being consumed. This is why you must become unshakable, not cold, not distant, just deeply rooted in yourself. Because when they see that your love isn't a cage, it becomes irresistible. When they see that choosing you doesn't mean disappearing, they'll stop running. And when they stop running, they finally start feeling. That's when they begin to love you, not out of fear, not out of duty, but out of desire, real uncursed desire. And here's the part you must never forget. The moment they realize they are free to walk away is the moment they begin to want to stay. Because love only becomes real to an avoidant when it stops feeling like captivity and starts feeling like freedom.